Jiao started coughing on the plane while I was buckling her seatbelt. She sat by the window, her small body swallowed by the wide seat, her feet dangling off the edge. She coughed twice, covered her mouth with the back of her hand out of habit, then looked up at me and said quietly, "Daddy, I'm okay. Drink some water." I unscrewed the thermos and handed it to her. She took a couple of sips and gave it back. Then she pulled out the well-worn picture book from the seat pocket. Little Bunny Goes Traveling. And quietly opened it to the first page. The first-class cabin lights were soft. A flight attendant came by with warm towels. I took one, wiped my hands, and glanced out the window. The plane was taxiing. Beyond the window was the early spring gray-blue sky and the wings of other planes queued for takeoff in the distance. Jiao coughed again as she turned to the second page. This time she buried her whole face in her elbow to muffle it. Her little shoulders shook. Someone approached. I looked up. A woman stood in the aisle, pulling a black carry-on. She wore a sharply tailored white blazer over a black silk camisole, a thin platinum chain at her neck with a small diamond pendant. Her dark brown hair fell in loose waves. Sunglasses pushed up on her head, face carefully made up. Rose-brown lipstick, light brown eyeshadow, cleanly shaped brows. Everything about her said first class was her natural habitat. Her gaze swept over me, then landed on Jiao. She frowned at a slight movement, but I saw it. She turned to the flight attendant behind her and said, not loudly, but in the quiet of first class, every word was distinct, "Can I change seats? I'd rather not sit next to someone with a child." Afraid of the noise, the attendant's expression flickered with embarrassment. "Ms. Chin, first class is fully booked today. I'm afraid, isn't that one empty?" She gestured to the seat beside me, her tone carrying an air of "you'll figure it out." I looked up at her. I recognized that face. Chin Mi, founder and CEO of Mi Cloud Technologies, a regular on business magazine covers, keynote speaker at last month's industry summit. I'd seen her on TV. I'd also seen her photo in a shareholder document. She had no idea who I was. The way she looked at me was no different from how she'd look at any ordinary man with a child. "My daughter is well behaved," I said. "She won't be a problem." Only then did Chin Mi actually look at me. Her gaze swept over me quickly, like a security scan from head to toe. She probably registered the washed-out gray sweater, the worn cuffs of my old jacket, the 2-day stubble on my jaw. She looked away and said to the attendant, "Find another solution." The attendant hesitated. "Ms. Chin, let me check if there's a seat in business class." Chin Mi nodded. As she walked toward the front of the cabin, passing my seat. She left behind a remark pitched just loud enough for me and Jiao to hear. "Keep your child in check. Not everyone in public spaces is obligated to tolerate kids' noise." Jiao looked up at me. Her eyes were big, her lashes long. Like her mother's. She asked quietly, "Daddy, why doesn't that auntie like us?" I lifted her onto my lap, held her little shoulders, rested my chin on top of her head. Her hair smelled of strawberry shampoo, soft. "The auntie's having a bad day," I said. "It's not your fault." Jiao seemed to half understand. She nodded, then flipped to the page in her book where the little bunny was having a birthday party, pointed, and said, "Then when I have a birthday, I'll invite her for cake. She'll feel better." I looked down at her upturned face, so earnest as she said that. The tiny sting of being dismissed in public as something smoothed over. "Okay," I said. "We'll invite her for cake on your birthday." The attendant later found Chin Mi a seat toward the front of business class. Once first class quieted down, Jiao flipped through her book a little longer, then fell asleep against my arm shortly after takeoff. Her little hands still gripped the edges of the book. Her breathing was even, with occasional soft murmurs. I looked down at her sleeping face. 4 years old, nose like mine, mouth like her mother's. When she was younger, everyone said she looked exactly like Su Wan. As she grew, she did come to resemble her more and more. Her mother left when she just turned 1. She couldn't say mama yet. Now she could say many things, but she rarely brought up that word on her own. She'd asked twice. The first time was when she was 2.5, at the park, seeing another child sitting on her mother's lap on a swing. When we got home, she tugged my hand and asked, "Daddy, all the other kids have mommies. Where's mine?" I didn't sleep that night. The second time was earlier this year. Her kindergarten teacher asked the class to draw my family. She drew Daddy, Grandma, and a bird with wings. She showed me the drawing and said, "This is Mommy." Teacher said she went to heaven. So I drew wings. Then I took her up to the rooftop that evening. The clouds were burning orange in the sunset. I held her and pointed. "Your wings look just like those clouds." She looked at them and said, "So Mommy's on top of the clouds?" "Yes," I said. She's up there, watching you. The plane jolted through some turbulence. Jiao shifted in my arms and kept sleeping. I glanced out the window, clouds stretching like an endless white blanket beneath the wings. Sunlight slanted through the window, touching her quivering lashes. I pulled out my phone. Before turning on airplane mode, I saw an encrypted email. The sender was the lawyer Su Wan had appointed for me before she passed. A man named He, who'd been handling this for years. The subject line was short. Me Cloud Technologies. Series B valuation clause triggered. I opened it. The gist was a few lines. Qin Mi's team hadn't met the performance metrics in the valuation agreement. The investors had activated the clause, requiring the shortfall to be covered within 30 days. If they couldn't, the founding team would be removed collectively. Qin Mi was looking for someone to take over, but no investors were willing to step in. At the bottom was a line. As the largest shareholder, you have the right to intervene. If you'd like us to handle it on your behalf, please reply. I closed the email. The screen went dark, and the clouds outside the window were blindingly white. I looked down at Jiao, asleep. The corners of her mouth were slightly curved, but she was dreaming of something. I thought of Su Wan. The night before she passed, she'd sat by the bed, watching Jiao sleep, and said, "Lu Yuanzhou, I'm leaving Me Cloud to you. Qin Mi was my best friend in college. She's tough on the outside, soft inside. If she ever gets into trouble, don't just stand by, but don't rush to help either. Wait for her to come to you." She'd held my hand, her grip already so weak. If you wait for her to come to you, rather than going to her first, she'll remember it more. I hadn't understood then. Now I think I was beginning to. I typed a line to lawyer He. Not yet. Wait for her to come to me. When the plane landed in Sanya, Jiao woke up. She rubbed her eyes, looked out at the blue sky and the green mountains in the distance, then sat up straight and said, "Daddy, it's the ocean." I helped her into her jacket, put her little rabbit backpack on her, and held her hand as we walked down the steps. The wind at the top of the stairs was warm, carrying that airport mix of fuel and sea air. Jiao took a deep breath, then sneezed a tiny sneeze. Her cold hadn't fully cleared. I crouched down, pulled her hat on, and said, "Let's check into the hotel first, then go see the ocean." "Okay." She grabbed my hand and hopped. While we were waiting for our luggage at the baggage claim, I saw Qin Mi. She was standing by the VIP exit, on the phone, her expression stern. An assistant stood beside her, flipping through documents in a briefcase. Qin Mi spoke into the phone with a furrowed brow. "I don't care what they say. I'll figure out the money myself." She hung up, stood still for 2 seconds, then raised a hand to rub her brow. It was a brief gesture, utterly different from the commanding presence she'd had on the plane. She didn't see me. She turned and left with her assistant. Jiao tugged my finger and pointed in that direction. "Daddy, that auntie." "Yeah, she looks unhappy. Probably work stuff." Jiao thought for a moment, then dug into her little rabbit backpack and pulled out an unopened pack of cookies. She handed it to me. "Then let's give these to her. She'll feel better." I looked down at the cookies she offered me. Strawberry flavor, her favorite. She always brought a pack on flights, saving them to nibble while watching the view. "Next time," I said, putting the cookies back in her bag. "We'll give them to her the next time we see her." We walked out of the arrivals hall. The Sanya sun was bright and warm, making me squint. Jiao took off her hat and tilted her face up to the sun. I held her hand, walking behind her, watching her little head sway in the sunlight. My phone buzzed again. Lawyer He. Qin Mi approached 3 mid-sized funds today. All declined. She's under a lot of pressure. I put the phone back in my pocket without replying. Su Wan was right. Wait for her to come to me. Sanya's beach at 4 in the afternoon was pale gold. Jiao crouched in the sand with her little shovel, building a castle. I took off my sandals and sat on the sand watching her. The sea breeze carried salt and damp, tangling her hair. She chattered to herself as she built. "This is the wall. This is the tower. This is where Mommy lives." I sat beside her, handing her wet sand. I heard her murmur, "Daddy, would Mommy like this castle?" "Yes," I said. "She would love it." She kept building. My phone buzzed again. Not an email. A call. Lawyer He. I answered. His voice was low. "Mr. Liu, Qin Mi came to our firm today. She looked up the trust's beneficiary and asked a few questions. I didn't disclose your identity, but she may have figured out something. She asked, does the shareholder plan to exit or intervene in management? I said, the shareholder hasn't indicated anything yet. She left with a complicated expression. Understood. I hung up. Jiao called, "Daddy, come see this gate." I walked over and crouched beside her. She pointed to an arched gap in the front of the castle. This is the gate, she said, placing a shell inside. And this is the key. The key stays at the gate. So mommy can open the door herself when she comes back. The wind blew her hair across her face, but she kept building seriously. I sat on the sand beside her, watching her profile. I thought of Chin-mi rubbing her brow at the airport exit. She was searching everywhere. She didn't know the person she was looking for was the man she dismissed on the plane, sitting next to a 4-year-old in an old jacket. I wasn't about to tell her yet. Some things need the right moment. Suwon's words. Wait for her to come to you. I was starting to understand. The sun slowly sank over the ocean. Jiao's castle cast a long shadow in the golden light. I turned my phone face down on the sand and focused on helping her build the gate that mommy could open herself. I sat on the Sanya beach until dark. Jiao's castle didn't collapse. I packed the wet sand to reinforce the walls. She decorated the top with a ring of shells. The last wave that came up stopped short of the castle. She crouched in front of it, holding her hand out to block the water, saying, "Don't touch my castle." The water receded. The castle stood. She turned to me with a smile, sand on her face, eyes curved like 2 moonlit crescents. That night, she took a bubble bath in the hotel's big tub. I sat on a little stool beside it, scrubbing her back. She cupped bubbles in her palms and blew them into a scatter of tiny foam pieces. She watched them drift down, then grew quiet for a moment. "Daddy," she said, "when I was building the castle today, I felt like mommy was watching me. My hand paused on her back. "Really?" "Yeah." She put the bubbles down. "Serious. I just felt it." When the wind came from behind, it was warm, like someone hugged me. I wrapped her in a towel, carried her out, and put her on the bed in her pajamas. She obediently stuck out her arms and legs, then yawned. I sat beside her and read a bedtime story. She was asleep by the 3rd page. I closed the book, dimmed the bedside lamp, and kissed her forehead gently. She turned over, burying her face in the pillow. I sat in the chair by the bed, not leaving right away. Outside, the faint sound of waves came through the night, rhythmic, like a great beast breathing evenly. I watched Jiao's outline curled under the covers. I remembered Suwon holding her by the window before she left. Jiao had just turned 1 then, couldn't walk yet, drooling on Suwon's shoulder as Suwon patted her back and said, "When mommy's gone, daddy will take the best care of you." Jiao didn't understand then. She just smeared drool on Suwon's collar. "You've raised her well," someone said at the door. I turned. The door was cracked open. The hotel housekeeper had poked her head in with a fresh towel. She was talking about the towel in my hands, but I just nodded and said softly, "Thank you." The door clicked shut. The room went quiet. The next morning, we were having breakfast in the hotel restaurant. Jiao sat across from me, nibbling a croissant. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, brightening the white tablecloth. She took 2 bites, then pointed outside and said, "Daddy, that auntie's here too." I followed her gaze. On the hotel's private beach, Chin-mi was crouched in the sand, facing a little boy of about 4 or 5. He was chubby, holding a red plastic shovel, excitedly directing her where to dig. Chin-mi wore a simple white cotton dress, her hair in a low ponytail. No makeup at all. She knelt before the boy, sleeves rolled up, helping him dig. Sand on her knees, that she didn't care. The way she smiled was completely different from the aloof expression on the plane. When she laughed, her eyes crinkled, and 2 dimples showed, the right one deeper than the left. Jiao chewed her croissant and asked, "Who's the little kid with that auntie?" "Probably her family." "Does she build sandcastles too?" "Probably." "Do you want to build with her?" Jiao thought. She wasn't very happy last time, but she's not mean to kids. She shoved the last bite into her mouth. Cheeks puffed. "We can build together when she's happy." I watched her chew and felt something soft inside. She added, "Daddy, did mommy smile like that too?" "Your mommy smiled just like that," I said. She had 2 dimples, and the right one was deeper than the left. Jiao looked down at her own chubby cheeks and poked both sides with her fingers. "What about me? Do I have them?" "You do. Your mommy gave them to you. The right one's a little deeper." She touched her right cheek, as if to check if the dimple was still there. Then she smiled. When she grinned, sure enough, the little hollow on the right showed. I reached over and wiped a croissant crumb from her mouth. She reached up and wiped my mouth too. We sat across from each other, smiling. Outside the window, the sea breeze lifted the corner of the tablecloth and let it fall. That afternoon, while Jiao was collecting shells by the sea, Chin-mi and the little boy were on the beach too. About 20 meters away, I sat under a beach umbrella reading, catching Chin-mi's silhouette in my peripheral vision. She was crouched beside him, helping him put shells into a bucket. He called her auntie in a clear, bright voice that carried across the sand. Qin response was soft and warm, a world away from the tone she'd used on the plane. I turned a page without looking up. At dusk, Jiao ran over carrying a plastic bucket full of shells. Panting, she set it in front of me and said, "Daddy, for you." I looked at the bucket. Shells of all colors and sizes, some still with wet sand clinging to them. "Thank you," I said. She nodded with satisfaction, then pointed toward the horizon. "Daddy, that auntie and the little kid left." I looked up. Qin was walking back along the beach, holding the boy's hand, their long silhouettes stretching in the setting sun. His plastic shovel was stuck in his pocket, bobbing with each step. Qin leaned down and said something to him, and he laughed. A clear, bright sound carried by the wind. On the return flight, I ran into Qin again. This time she didn't change seats. She boarded first class while I was buckling Jiao's seatbelt. Jiao wore a little yellow jacket today, her picture book open and ready. Qin stopped at my seat, paused, then sat down. This time, she was my neighbor. She put her bag away and turned to look at Jiao. Jiao looked back. They held eye contact for 2 seconds. Qin's demeanor was entirely different from our first meeting. She hesitated, then pulled an individually wrapped chocolate from her bag and held it out to Jiao. "I'm sorry about last time," she said. "This is for you." Jiao looked at the chocolate, then at me. I nodded. She took it, turning it over in her hands to examine the English label, then said softly, "Thank you, Auntie." Qin watched her examine the chocolate, and a smile slowly curved her mouth. The right dimple appeared. As she pulled her hand back, she glanced at me, her gaze lingering a moment. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. "Have we met somewhere before?" I smiled. "No," she frowned, studying me again, trying to place me. But she didn't remember. She turned to fasten her seatbelt. After takeoff, Jiao flipped through her book for a while, then fell asleep, leaning toward me, her little head resting against my arm. Qin looked at documents on her phone, occasionally glancing over. "How old is she?" she asked suddenly. 4. "She's quiet, shy at first, but opens up when she's comfortable." Qin nodded, her eyes returning to the screen. I caught a glimpse of the document on her phone, a financing proposal for MiCloud, with a red word stamped at the top. "Urgent." She angled the screen away slightly. I looked away. When we landed, she deplaned first, pulling her carry-on and walking quickly, passing me. She paused and said, "Your daughter really is well behaved. I was out of line last time." Then she walked away. Jiao rubbed her eyes. "The auntie left." "Yeah, she has work to do. As we left the airport, lawyer," he messaged. Qin met 3 potential backers today. 2 said no. 1 is undecided. She has one more meeting tomorrow, with a mid-sized fund. Low chance of success. "Mr. Liu, what's your call?" I carried Jiao's rabbit backpack and held her as we walked to the car. She mumbled against my shoulder, "Daddy, I want yogurt." I said I'd get it in the car. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't check it until I'd buckled Jiao into her car seat and handed her a yogurt from the cooler. Then I replied to lawyer he. "After she's exhausted every option she can find, then I'll show up." He replied quickly. "But what if she can't find one? She'll find me." I tucked the phone into the console and started the car. Jiao sipped her yogurt with a slurping sound in the back. The city was lighting up in the dusk, streetlights coming on one by one like someone turning a switch. As we drove through familiar streets in the west part of town, Jiao suddenly pointed out the window and asked, "Daddy, is that where Mommy used to work?" I glanced in that direction. MiCloud's headquarters stood quietly in the last glow of sunset, its rooftop logo glowing softly against the darkening sky. "Yes," I said, "that's where your mommy wrote her name." Jiao pressed her face to the window and watched for a while, then finished the last of her yogurt and handed me the carton. "Will we go there again?" "Yes, okay." She leaned back in her car seat and closed her eyes. In the rearview mirror, her small face wore a faint, satisfied smile. The dimple on her right cheek just visible. I turned the car into our street. The headlights caught the glow of one street lamp after another. Life went on like this. The shells Jiao had collected at the beach, I washed and placed on the living room windowsill next to her mother's photo. Beside it was the copy of Little Bunny Goes Traveling, its pages now curled at the edges. Everything was quiet, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. I was waiting for a call. The call came on the 3rd Thursday night. Jiao was asleep. I was sitting on the living room sofa, looking at architectural drawings on my laptop. After Suwon passed, I'd taken over her trust and the small design commissions she'd been working on in her last months. Nothing commercial, just projects she'd found interesting. I didn't talk about them much. But late at night, when I opened them, it felt like she was still beside me. My phone buzzed at a text forwarded by lawyer he. One line. Ms. Chenmi requests a meeting at 10 o'clock a.m. tomorrow. She wants to discuss equity matters. Below, he added, she may be at her limit. I didn't tell her who you are. Will you come? I put down the phone and looked at Jiao, asleep on the sofa, curled under a little blanket, holding her rabbit plush. I scooped her up and put her in bed. She mumbled, Daddy, good night. I tucked her in, turned off the light, and sat in my study to reply to he. Yes. The next morning, I dropped Jiao at kindergarten. She waved from the gate, calling, Daddy, pick me up early. I said I would. Then I got in the car and drove toward MiCloud. I didn't use the underground garage that I parked across the street and sat in the car for a few minutes, looking in the rearview mirror. Gray sweater, old jacket, a light stubble, same as on the plane. Maybe that was deliberate. I wanted to see if she would react any differently when she realized who the shareholder was. I got out, crossed the street, and walked into MiCloud's lobby. The receptionist asked if I had an appointment. I said lawyer. He had scheduled 10:00. She checked and said, Mr. Liu, please go up to the 18th floor. Ms. Chen is expecting you in her office. I nodded and walked to the elevator. As it rose, I looked at the MiCloud logo wall in the lobby. White background, blue text, clean and simple. Tucked in the corner of the logo were the initials of the technical proposal Su-Wan had designed in college. Others wouldn't notice, but I saw it immediately. On the 18th floor, the hallway was carpeted in light gray. Half-open office doors showed people working. At the end, a dark brown door. I knocked twice. Chenmi's voice came through, crisper than on the plane, but carrying a faint, almost imperceptible weariness. Come in. I pushed the door open. Her office was large, floor-to-ceiling windows facing south with a view of the city skyline. She sat behind a wide desk, documents spread before her, a cup of cold coffee beside them. She wore a white silk blouse today, hair pinned up, small gold earrings. Her makeup was lighter than on the plane, but there was a grayness beneath her eyes that foundation couldn't hide. When she looked up, her face ran through an impressive sequence. Professional greeting, confusion, recollection, and finally an am I mistaken? Uncertainty. She frowned. Liu Yuanzhou. I walked in and sat across from her. She stared at me for about 3 seconds. Then she remembered. She leaned back, setting down her coffee cup, her expression shifting from uncertainty to something more layered. Bewilderment mixed with wariness. You were on the plane. Your daughter, Jiao. She nodded, then looked down at the documents he had sent. She flipped through a page, saw the words beneficiary representative, Liu Yuanzhou, and looked up again. The professional distance she'd maintained for the unknown investor had mostly crumbled. Her lips moved, but her voice came out drier than she'd expected. You're the largest shareholder. You're the beneficiary of the Su-Wan Trust. Yes. She sat behind the desk, her fingers resting on the papers. She looked down at that page again, then back up, her gaze fixed on me. This time her voice was lower, carrying a note of uncertainty triggered by an old memory. Who was Su-Wan to you? I pulled out my phone and found a photo. Su-Wan holding 1-month-old Jiao on our balcony. Sunlight from the side. Her smile soft, the right dimple deeper than the left. I turned the phone toward Chenmi. She's my daughter's mother. The technical prototype for MiCloud was written by her in college. Before she died, she left this company's shares to me. Chenmi stared at the photo for a long time. Her gaze moved from the screen to my face, then back to the documents on the table. Her hands trembled slightly. She set the phone down, her voice even lower. I didn't know she was gone. I didn't know anything. She's been gone over 3 years. 3 years. She repeated the word, then turned to look out the window. The city was bright in the afternoon light, but her profile seemed dim against it. After a long moment, she asked, when she left, did she say anything? Yes. I said. She said, if MiCloud ever runs into trouble, don't just stand by and watch. Chenmi turned back to look at me. The edges of her eyes flushed with a faint red. She leaned back in her chair, took a breath, and exhaled slowly. When she spoke again, her voice had steadied. So you're here to help me? Or did I'm here to negotiate? Her expression tensed slightly. What terms? I pulled out the investment proposal I prepared and placed it on the desk. Not drawn up by lawyer, I'd written it myself. The terms were few, with 2 core points. First, I would cover the valuation shortfall and increase my stake to 78%. Second, Chenmi would retain the CEO position and operational authority. But she would have to do one thing first. Chenmi looked down at the 2 lines. Her gaze lingered on the second. She looked up. What? Apologize to my daughter. In person, she went still. She'd probably prepared for conditions. Control. Personnel adjustments. Profit distribution. Strategic direction. But not these words. She sat in that CEO chair, like someone had given her a gentle shove. Her balance thrown off for a moment before writing itself. Her lips parted. That's it. That's it. She looked down at the proposal, her finger tracing the paper as if confirming she'd read it correctly. When she looked up, her expression was one I'd never seen on her face before. A mix of surprise, loosening, something held back for a long time beginning to melt. On the plane that day, she said, pausing, why didn't you tell me who you were? Because that day, I was sitting with my daughter. Who we are had nothing to do with it. You didn't like sitting next to a father with a child because you saw a father with a child. It had nothing to do with his shares. Chinmi sat in her chair, silent. The light fell across her face. The redness at the edges of her eyes still hadn't faded. She picked up the proposal. Read it carefully, then set it down. Tomorrow afternoon. Bring her. I'll tell her. The next day at 4:30. I picked up Xiao from kindergarten and drove to meet Cloud. She sat in the back, asking, Daddy, where are we going? To see that Andy? Xiao thought for a moment. The one with the chocolate. Yes, she nodded, looked down at her yellow bear sweatshirt, patted the bare face on the stomach, and said, will she be happy today? She will. I held her hand and walked into the building. On the 18th floor, Chinmi stood at the door of her office, waiting. Today she wore no suit, a light blue knit cardigan, hair loose. When she saw Xiao step out of the elevator, she crouched down to her eye level. Xiao held my hand, looking at Chinmi shifting her feet, but not stepping back. Chinmi looked seriously into her eyes and spoke. Little one, I said something unkind on the plane. I was having a bad day and forgot my manners. I want to apologize. I'm sorry. Xiao looked at her face for about 2 seconds, blinking. Then she let go of my hand, stepped forward, and pulled a lollipop from her coat pocket, the kind that came with her strawberry cookies. And held it out to Chinmi. Don't cry, Auntie, she said, pressing the candy into her hand. Candy makes you feel better. When Chinmi took the candy, her tears fell without warning. She stared at the pink-wrapped lollipop in her palm as a tear landed on the wrapper, making a soft sound. Xiao reached up and patted her head. Auntie, don't cry. Chinmi sniffled, nodded hard, stood up, and wiped her tears. She looked down at Xiao, her mouth curving. The right dimple appeared. She clutched the candy in her hand. Her voice was still a little hoarse, but warm now. Thank you. Xiao looked at her dimple, then back at me, then back at Chinmi. She said, Auntie, you look just as pretty as Mommy when you smile. Chinmi paused. Then she crouched down and gave Xiao a gentle hug. When she pulled back, she wiped her eyes and said, Come on. Auntie will take you upstairs to see the view. Xiao looked at me. I nodded. She took Chinmi's hand and I watched them walk away down the hall. One tall, one small. Chinmi's hand held Xiao's small one gently but securely. They stopped at the floor-to-ceiling window at the end of the corridor. Chinmi lifted Xiao up to look out. The sunset light streamed through, painting them both in a warm golden glow. Xiao pointed at something in the distance, and Chinmi leaned in, smiling, and replied, Outside, the city spread out. Buildings rising and falling, streets crisscrossing. Their silhouettes merged in the fading light, like something just beginning to take shape. I stood at the other end of the hall. My phone buzzed. Lawyer he. Ms. Chin has confirmed the proposal terms. She signed. I glanced at the message, then looked back at the lit window at the end of the hall. Chinmi stood there holding Xiao, tilting her head to talk to her. Xiao laughed, drawing something on the glass with her finger. Chinmi nodded, smiling, and drew a few strokes beside hers. I put my phone away and walked toward that light. After Chinmi signed the agreement, we began an unusual relationship. We met once a week for shareholder meetings, but our interaction felt less like shareholder and CEO and more like two people co-parenting a child. At the first formal meeting the Thursday after the signing, I brought Xiao because her kindergarten had closed early and our nanny was away. She sat in the corner of the meeting room with her rabbit backpack, drawing. I sat at one end of the long table. Chinmi sat at the other. Between us, the table and a projector, but after she finished her quarterly data presentation, her gaze drifted to the corner, where she saw Xiao sprawled on the floor coloring. Her mouth curved naturally. I'll adjust that data point later, she said. Finish reviewing the strategy section. I'm done. I said, your Q3 revenue projection is too conservative. Raise it by 15%. She frowned at the data, calculated briefly, then looked up. What makes you think we can raise it 15%? Because the 2 clients you lost last Q3. I brought them back. I forwarded an email from my phone. Suwon had been in contact with one of them before she passed. The talk stalled halfway. I took 3 months to finish the rest. Chinmi looked at the email on her phone, then was quiet for a moment. When did you do this? While you were busy looking for funding. She looked at me with an expression that said, how many other things do you have that I don't know about? But the slight curve of her mouth betrayed her true feeling, that not dissatisfaction, but surprise. Surprise that I'd done what she should have done. I in the corner. Jiao finished her drawing and ran over to show us. Daddy, look, I drew 3 people. I looked down. 3 stick figures. 1 tall, 1 medium, 1 small. The tall one wore blue. The medium one wore yellow. The small one had pigtails. Which one is me? I asked. Jiao pointed to the yellow one. This is Auntie. You wore a yellow dress today. Auntie. Chinmi was indeed wearing a pale yellow dress. She looked down at it, then at the drawing. You made me look pretty good. She turned to me. What about Daddy? This is Daddy. Jiao pointed to the blue stick figure. Daddy likes blue best. I looked down at my gray sweater, and then at the blue figure in her drawing. I didn't correct her. After the meeting, Chinmi walked us downstairs. Jiao held her hand most of the way, only letting go at the car. Chinmi crouched down and said, come play again next week. Jiao nodded enthusiastically. She stood up and looked at me. Lu Yuanzhou, are you free tomorrow evening? I'd like to take you to dinner. On what occasion? Tio, thank you for bringing back those clients. I nodded. Okay, but I'll bring Jiao. I'm inviting both of you. She turned and walked back inside. I watched her go. Jiao tugged my hand. Daddy, Auntie's taking us to dinner. Yet I'm wearing my bear dress. Okay. The dinner was at a quiet Shanghai-style restaurant. Chinmi had booked a private room. The table was round. Just 3 of us. The dishes were few, but refined. Jiao sat in her high chair, laboring to scoop up a piece of braised pork with her spoon, finally getting it into her mouth. She chewed and looked up. Delicious. Chinmi put another piece in her bowl, and she went back to work. Lu Yuanzhou, Chinmi said, setting down her chopsticks. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. How did you manage all these years? Raising Jiao by yourself. I thought. One step at a time. At first, it was chaos every day. I learned as I went. The day she took her first steps, she fell 3 times. I was there to catch her every time. By the 3rd catch, I realized, and no matter what happens, I'll always be there to catch her. Chinmi looked down at her bowl. After a long pause, she said, I used to think raising kids was a huge hassle. The day I met you on the plane, I'd just come out of a terrible meeting. I was in a foul mood. When I saw you with a kid in first class, I thought, what a waste, bringing a kid to first class. She looked up and smiled. Now I realize how mean and stupid I was. You apologized to my daughter. I said, that's more than most people do. Jiao finished her pork, clapped her hands, and said, Auntie, are you coming to our house tomorrow? Chinmi blinked, then smiled and nodded. Yes, Auntie will bring you a new picture book. Jiao went back to her next piece of pork, satisfied that we stayed late. When Chinmi drove us home, she parked at the curb and helped me unbuckle Jiao from her car seat. Jiao was already asleep. When I lifted her out, her cheek rested on my shoulder, her breathing steady. Chinmi watched. You hold her very steadily, she said quietly. 3 years of practice. She nodded. I took a few steps toward the entrance when I heard her voice behind me. Lu Yuanzhou. I turned. She stood under the streetlight in her pale yellow dress, bag in hand, the night wind lifting her hair and letting it fall. She looked at me and said, Suwon made the right choice. I stood at the entrance with sleeping Jiao in my arms, the streetlight wrapping us in a circle of warm yellow. I looked at her. Thank you. She waved and walked away. After that, Chinmi started coming over more often. At first, it was dropping by on weekend afternoons to bring a new picture book. Then it became Jiao said she wanted strawberries, so I picked some up. Then it became I had nothing to do today, so I came to draw with her. When she arrived, Jiao would bounce at the door shouting, Auntie Xiaomi's here. Chinmi would crouch down, catching her full-on tackle, and they'd tumble onto the floor together. While I cooked in the kitchen, I'd hear their laughter from the living room. Jiao's giggles and Chinmi's, 2 intertwined strands of sound. Once, as I was chopping vegetables, I paused. That laughter felt familiar. Like a phantom echo from over 3 years ago, when Suwon and Jiao had played on the same floor. I couldn't pinpoint it, but something in that frequency resonated. The sizzle of oil in the pan pulled me back. After dinner one night, Chinmi helped bathe Jiao, read her a bedtime story, and only came out after Jiao had fallen asleep. I sat in the living room flipping through documents. She emerged in the cream sweater she'd worn that day, a few strands of damp hair clinging to her temples. She sat down beside me and picked up one of Xiao's drawings. Still 3 stick figures, but with more detail now. The tall one wore blue and had glasses. When did she start drawing these? Qingmi asked. 6 months ago. She didn't used to draw people much. Lately, she draws them a lot. Qingmi studied the drawing, her finger tracing the little blue figure. Without looking up, she said very softly, Lu Yuanzhou, have you thought about the future? What kind of future, like? When Xiao's older. Like yourself. She looked up. You can't be alone forever. I leaned back into the sofa, the warm living room light softening her features. Her eyes shone in it, the right dimple just visible. I thought for a while before speaking. I've thought about it, but I didn't dare think too far. Why not? Because if you think too much, you start hoping. And if those hopes don't come true. I paused. It's worse than not hoping at all. She sat beside me, still holding the drawing. After a long silence, she said, what if they do come true? Quiet settled between us. The old clock on the wall ticked. A thin line of light came through the crack in Xiao's door. She sat there, the edges of the drawing in her hands curling slightly, her lashes casting a fan of shadow under the lamp. I reached over and took the drawing from her, turning it to the back. On the reverse, my daughter had written in wobbly pencil strokes, Daddy, Xiaomi me. I turned it toward Qingmi so she could see. She stared at those 3 words for 2 seconds, then laughed. When she laughed, the right dimple was much deeper than the left, just like Su Wan. She set the drawing down and reached out, placing her hand over mine. Her palm was warm, her pressure light. Next time, she said, tell Xiao to draw me prettier. I held her hand. During that time, Mi Cloud was quietly changing. Qingmi and I grew more in sync. The weekly shareholder meetings turned into casual check-ins. Sometimes she'd drop off takeout after working late, sit and chat. Sometimes I'd bring her a new drawing from Xiao, and she'd show me the latest data. Xiao became the thread connecting us. Her 4-year-old ability to give trust without reservation, slowly stitching 2 adult worlds together. One afternoon, driving to pick up Xiao, I passed Mi Cloud. At a red light, I looked up at the building. Its glass facade gleamed blue in the afternoon sun. My phone buzzed. Qingmi, you're downstairs. I see you. I looked up toward the 18th floor. A shadow moved behind the glass. I replied, Xiao gets out in half an hour. Just passing by. She replied, come up. I'm organizing old files. I found something I want to show you. I crossed the street and went inside. The 18th floor was quieter than usual. Qingmi's office door was open. She was crouched by a filing cabinet, surrounded by open boxes. She looked up as I came in, brushed the dust off her hands, and stood. We're moving offices and going through old files. I found some old stuff in my technical department archives. She handed me a light blue folder. I opened it. Inside were handwritten technical proposals. The paper yellowed and curled. The handwriting was delicate and clear. I recognized it immediately. Su Wan's handwriting. The way she wrote the top stroke of the character for secret always leaned slightly to the right. She'd had that habit since college. She was my freshman year roommate. Qingmi said, her voice softer than usual. We used to go to the library together to do homework. She always finished before me. Then she'd lie there watching me. Once I got stuck on an algorithm, and she sat up, grabbed my notebook, turned to the back, and wrote a full solution on the spot. That solution became the technical foundation for Mi Cloud. I flipped through the pages. One by one, Su Wan's handwriting evolved from her freshman year immaturity to her later crispness, spanning years. On a second-year paper, she'd scribbled in the margin, Qingmi staying up late again. Get her some coffee. Beside it, she'd drawn a wobbly coffee cup. I stood in that office flipping through old documents. Su Wan's laugh seemed to rise from the pages. Light and warm. Qingmi stood beside me, silent. I stopped at the final page. Inside was a photo. 2 young women in graduation gowns under an old locust tree at the university gate, their shadows long in the sun. The one with short hair and a round face was Qingmi. The one with the ponytail and smiling, crinkled eyes was Su Wan. You kept this? I asked. Qingmi stepped closer and looked at the photo. Her voice was soft. I moved several times and never threw it away. She paused. Do you know why I didn't know when she passed? I looked at her. We had a fight after senior year. Something small that I don't even remember what. I think it was about our graduation project division. We didn't speak for 6 months. I went into business. She went elsewhere. We kept in touch off and on, but it wasn't close anymore. She looked at the photo. So when she passed, No one told me. Because we weren't close anymore. Her voice rasped on the word close. Like someone carving something off herself. Finally getting it free. But the spot still bore a mark. She never blamed you. I said. Chimi looked up. Before she left, she told me many things. I slid the photo from the folder and laid it on the desk. She said you were her closest friend in college. Later, you both got busy, lost contact. But every time she thought of college, she thought of you first. I pushed the photo toward her. If she thought you were not close, she wouldn't have left me those words. Chimi stood across the desk, looking at the photo. Her lips moved. Then she turned to the window. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass, catching a gleam at the corner of her eye. She didn't turn back, standing with her back to me. Lu Yuanzhou, she said, can I have one photo? Just one, to put in my office. Keep that one. I said. She turned back, eyes red, but her mouth curved. She picked the photo up from the desk and placed it on the corner of her own desk in a simple black frame. She stepped back and looked at it for a moment, then turned to face me. Thank you. She said that if she were here, I said, she'd have sent you one herself. Chimi looked down and smiled briefly, the right dimple showing. She closed the folder in my hands. Take these, she said. They were hers. You should keep them more than I should. I took it. The old pages had a certain weight in my palm. The creases were nearly breaking, but the fine writing inside was intact. I tucked the folder under my arm. At the door, Chimi said, I'll pick up Xiao tonight. Yet I'll come watch her. You can go home and go through those things. It'll take you some time. Okay. The elevator. She caught up and pressed a lollipop into my hand, at the same strawberry kind Xiao had given her. Pink wrapper. Xiao gave me this. She said, I've been saving it. Take it to her and tell her auntie will pick her up from kindergarten tomorrow. I looked at the lollipop. Put it in my pocket. She'll be happy. The elevator closed. On the way down, I looked at the light blue folder in my arm. The outlines of the pages visible through the translucent cover, stack upon stack. As if beneath the silent, wordless paper lay a person's earnest intensity from her 20s. I traced the characters on the cover. Suwon technical notes. Written in her sophomore year. The handwriting rounded and neat. The top stroke not yet leaning. The elevator opened to the lobby. Sunlight poured through the glass doors. I stood in it and held the folder a little closer. The lollipop was hard in my pocket, pressing against my thigh through the fabric. I walked out thinking, when Xiao's older, I'll show her this folder. I'll tell her these are the words Mommy wrote when she was young. And she had a good friend named Chimi, and together they wrote many proposals and stayed up many nights. And I'll tell her that the lollipop she gave to Auntie, she saved it for months without eating it. I put the folder in my study drawer, with Suwon's other belongings. Once, Xiao found it out of curiosity. When she saw her mother's name on the cover, she touched the characters. Daddy, what is this? Mommy's college homework, I said. She flipped to a page of dense formulas and symbols, frowned, and closed it. I don't even understand Mommy's writing. I picked her up. You will when you're older. She nodded and ran off to play with her blocks. Sitting in the study, putting the folder back in the drawer, I made a note. When she's a little older, I'll read her every word. Chimi started picking Xiao up from kindergarten regularly. Her office was only 2 blocks away. She could usually make it by dismissal. She registered as an authorized pickup, gave her fingerprint, and when she first went, a few parents gave her second looks. Maybe a woman in a blazer seemed out of place. But when Xiao ran out and threw herself at Chimi's legs yelling, Auntie, show me, the looks faded. One rainy day, Chimi forgot her umbrella. She took off her jacket and held it over Xiao's head, getting soaked herself. In the car, Xiao saw her dripping hair and reached up to wipe her face. Chimi took her hand and held it. It's okay. Auntie will dry off at home. Xiao said. Auntie, I'll have Daddy bring you an umbrella. You can keep it in your car so you won't forget. Chimi said. Okay. That night, when Chimi brought Xiao back, her hair was still damp. I took Xiao at the door and saw the water dripping from her ends. Come in and dry off, I said. She hesitated, then came in. I handed her the hairdryer from the bathroom. She sat on the sofa. Xiao pressed beside her looking at a picture book. Chimi took the dryer but didn't start right away. She looked down at the page Xiao was reading. Their heads bent together for a long time. Then she looked up at me. Your daughter knows more words now. She learned on her own. Her teacher says she's ahead of her class. I sat down, just like her mother. After she said it, Chimi went quiet. She looked down at the dryer, plugged it in, and started blowing. The warm hum filled the living room. Xiao sprawled on the sofa with her book. I sat in my chair watching. Qinmi half closed her eyes as the warm air dried the water from her face, her hair swaying in the breeze. Xiao looked up, then leaned over and pressed her lips to Qinmi's cheek very lightly. Qinmi opened her eyes, saw Xiao's face close, and shut off the dryer. She paused, then gathered Xiao into her arms. Chin resting on her head, Xiao nestled against her, small hands on her shoulders. I sat in my chair and watched. Outside, the rain continued, tapping the window. The company. Qinmi started to change. In meetings, she used to be tense, a top bowstring. Now she'd glance at her phone between agenda items, looking at Xiao's drawings, or at my messages about what Xiao had done at school. Her assistant commented that Qin Zong seemed to smile more often lately. She glanced at her phone and didn't argue. Longtime employees also noticed the small photo frame on her desk. Someone asked who it was. She simply said an old college friend. At MiCloud's mid-year all-staff meeting, after Qin Mi wrapped up the performance summary, she paused, looking at the hundreds of faces before her. She said, I want to add one thing. MiCloud wasn't founded by one person. I had a very good friend in college, but she wrote the original code. Without that code, there'd be no MiCloud. She's gone now, but her work is still here. She pointed in the direction of her desk, though the audience couldn't see the frame. Her work is still in this company, and we're going to carry it forward. I wanted you all to know. The room was quiet for a moment. Then someone started clapping. That night, I got a message, not from Qinmi, but from MiCloud's technical director, a middle-aged man named Lin. He wrote, Mr. Liu, Qin Zong mentioned Sister Sue at the staff meeting today. Those of us who've been here a long time still remember her. After all these years, Qin Zong finally said it out loud. I looked at that message for a long time and replied. She would have been happy. The next day, when I picked Xiao up, Qinmi was already there, standing under the phoenix tree at the kindergarten gate. She held a new umbrella. Light blue, one she'd bought after Xiao had reminded her. When she saw me, she held it up. I bought it. Now I won't forget. Still keep it with you, just in case. She looked at me and said, Liu Yuanzhou, do you know what I look forward to most every day? What? 4:30 p.m. She said, seeing Xiao run out that gate. We stood under the tree. Afternoon sunlight sifted through the leaves. The kindergarten gate opened. Xiao came charging out in her rabbit backpack. She saw me first, then Qinmi, and changed course, launching herself at Qinmi and Xiaomi. You brought your umbrella. She pointed at the light blue folding umbrella in Qinmi's hand. Qinmi crouched and caught her. Yep, Auntie kept her promise. Xiao took the umbrella, opened it herself, and held it up, looking at the canopy. It's so big. It can cover 3 people. Qinmi looked up at me. In the sunlight, my mouth curved. That afternoon, the 3 of us sat in the park beside the kindergarten for a long time. Xiao chased fallen leaves with the umbrella. Qinmi watched from the bench. I stood nearby and took a few photos. By sunset, when the clouds had turned pale pink, Xiao ran back, closed the umbrella, and handed it to Qinmi. Auntie, take it home. Use it every time it rains. Qinmi took it and patted her hair. Okay. Every time. Xiao handed it over. I pressed my phone's shutter. The light blue canopy was half open, the sunset light spilling over Qinmi's shoulder. She was smiling, the right dimple deeper than the left. I looked at the photo, then locked the screen. Other children were playing in the park, their laughter carrying across the breeze. Xiao ran off again, calling, Auntie Xiaomi, come look at this. Qinmi stood and followed, moving faster than before. I sat on the bench and watched their 2 silhouettes. One tall and one small, running near and far in the evening light. The light blue umbrella leaned against the leg of the bench, its raindrops dried by the wind. I reached down and touched its handle. Cool, but soon warm. 1 autumn weekend. A typhoon passed through, bringing heavy rain. Qinmi had planned to take Xiao to a parent-child craft activity, but it was canceled. Xiao leaned on the windowsill, watching the rain streak down the glass, and turned to ask, Daddy, is Auntie Xiaomi coming today? Before I could even message her, Qinmi's message came first. The rain's too heavy. Craft class canceled, but I'd still like to come see Xiao. Is that okay? I replied. Okay, bring an umbrella. She replied with a sticker of an umbrella. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Qinmi standing there with that light blue umbrella. Her pants cuffs wet, her shoes soaked. She closed the umbrella and shook off the water on the doormat. Xiao had already run in and wrapped her arms around her waist. Auntie Xiaomi, you got wet. Xiao looked up at her damp pants. Qinmi crouched to her level and touched her cheek. Just a little. Your daddy told me to bring an umbrella. I did. Jiao pulled her toward the living room. I took the umbrella to the balcony to open and dry it. When I returned, Qinmi was sitting cross-legged on the carpet, and Jiao was showing her a new drawing. A rainy day scene. 3 little figures huddled under one very large umbrella, with wobbly raindrops drawn around the edges. Qinmi studied it for a while, holding it up to the light. The umbrella is much better than last time, because you have a blue umbrella. Auntie. Jiao jumped up, ran to the balcony, brought back the drying umbrella, and opened it. See, just the same. The umbrella canopy was indeed the same shade of blue as the one in the drawing. Qinmi sat on the carpet, looking up at the open umbrella, then back at the drawing, and burst out laughing. She curled up on the carpet, still holding the drawing, shoulders shaking. Jiao laughed too. I stood at the kitchen door watching them both on the floor, laughing together under that open umbrella. The rain outside and their laughter mixed through the apartment. That afternoon, I made noodles. The 3 of us squeezed around the table. Qinmi picked out the mushrooms she didn't like and put them on her plate. Jiao saw her do it, picked out her own mushrooms, and put them on the plate too. Qinmi said, "You're copying me." Jiao said, "Because mushrooms taste bad." I looked at both of them, then took the whole pile of mushrooms onto my own plate. After we ate, the rain let up. Qinmi helped Jiao wash the dishes, and they curled up in the corner of the living room sofa with a picture book. Jiao nestled in her arms, holding the book. Qinmi's arms wrapped around from behind, pointing at the words and reading each line. Sunlight broke through the thinning clouds, spotting the sofa with a small patch of brightness. I sat on the windowsill and watched. When the book reached its last page, Jiao had fallen asleep in Qinmi's arms, her little finger still gripping a corner of the page. Qinmi looked down at her face, not moving. After a long moment, she looked up at me, her voice quiet. Her eyelashes are so long, just like Suwan's, yeah? I used to watch her sleep for a long time every time, sometimes half an hour, just doing nothing. Qinmi looked down at Jiao again. Her fingertip brushed Jiao's eyelashes. Featherlight. Then she set the book down, gently shifted Jiao from her lap to the sofa, and covered her with a small blanket. She stood and walked to the window, standing beside me. The rain had stopped. Clouds were breaking apart, revealing patches of light blue sky. The streets were still wet, reflecting the sky and buildings. Qinmi tucked a strand of windblown hair behind her ear and looked at me. Lu Yuanzhou, I used to think you were just lucky. You married Su Wan, inherited the shares. Then I realized what? She thought for a moment. Su Wan chose you because you were worthy. You kept what was hers, and you kept her daughter. That's harder than inheriting any amount of money. That I leaned against the windowsill and looked at her. Her profile was soft in the post-rain light. Her chin tilted slightly upward, like she was watching the clouds. She wore a white knit sweater today, the cuffs slightly loose, revealing a thin wrist. The pink lollipop Jiao had given her was still in her bag, but she'd said she'd eat it when she did something big. She probably didn't realize that this afternoon, standing at my window watching the rain clear, was already a big thing for me. Qinmi, I said. She turned. You said the thing you look forward to most is 4.30. The thing I look forward to most is... I paused. The doorbell, and Jiao running to open it, and you standing there. She looked at me. Light from the clearing clouds fell between us on the floor. The picture book was still in her hand, its cover showing a rabbit with an umbrella. She looked down at it, then back up. Her right dimple was deep. Then you can look forward to it every day. She said. I reached out. She reached out. We held hands by the window, and then let go. But as she pulled away, her fingers lingered a moment in my palm. I knew what that pause meant. My phone on the windowsill lit up. A photo of Jiao's drawing. The 3 figures under the big umbrella. I saved it, locked the screen, checked the time. 3:30 p.m. An hour until 4.30. In an hour, Jiao would wake up, rubbing her eyes, calling for Annie Xiaomi. She'd find she wasn't dreaming. Annie Xiaomi was still here, in her living room, sitting beside her, waiting for her to wake. I thought of that drawing. 3 people under one umbrella. The umbrella was so big it could keep all the rain out. Outside, the sky was clearing. The air had that clean, washed-through smell after rain. 6 months later, when MiCloud's annual performance report came out, the whole company breathed a sigh of relief. The numbers had not only filled last year's hole, they'd grown. Qinmi's tone at the all-staff meeting was much lighter than the year before. She ended with, "We got through this year because there's an extra set of eyes on the numbers now, and those eyes aren't at my desk." She glanced in my direction. I sat in the back row, next to Jiao. She didn't understand the numbers, but but she was busy eating a box of cookies Qin Mi's assistant had prepared for her. After the meeting, Qin Mi came down from the stage and walked through the crowd toward us. Jiao jumped from her seat and ran to her, wrapping her arms around her legs. Qin Mi bent and lifted her. A few old colleagues watched, smiled, and nodded without comment. Jiao whispered something in her ear. Qin Mi laughed. What did she say? I asked. She said my dress is pretty today. Qin Mi wore a light blue dress, hair pinned up, small gold earrings swaying. Prettier than your old sweater. I looked down at my dark gray shirt. I'm wearing a shirt. You wore that same one at last year's shareholder meeting. She set Jiao down, took her hand, and headed for the door without looking back. I remember everything you wear. I paused, then followed. With the company stabilized, Qin Mi started spending more weekends with Jiao. Sometimes the zoo, sometimes the children's section at the art museum, sometimes just sitting on my living room carpet doing puzzles. Jiao was getting faster. When Qin Mi couldn't keep up, she'd clap and say, Auntie Xiaomi, you lose. Qin Mi would make an exaggerated, disappointed face, and Jiao would roll around laughing. I'd sit nearby with a book, but my gaze always drifted to them. One evening, Jiao was watering her succulents on the balcony, and Qin Mi stood beside me, saying, Lu Yuanzhou, it's my birthday next month. I know. How do you know? I checked the founder information in the shareholder documents. She laughed. You're terrifying. So what do you want to do for your birthday? She thought. I want to take Jiao on a plane. She said she wanted to see the clouds again. Where to? Anywhere. Sonya's fine, as long as there's an ocean. Okay, I said. I'll help her pack. The morning we left, Jiao woke early, put on her rabbit backpack herself, and stood at the door urging us to hurry. When Qin Mi arrived to pick her up, she was already hopping at the door. Auntie Xiaomi, we're going on a plane. She sang an off-key children's song from her car seat the whole way. Qin Mi glanced at her in the rearview mirror, smiling. First class again. This time Qin Mi boarded first, carrying Jiao to the window seat. She buckled her in and put her book within reach. Jiao opened it, flipped 2 pages, set it down, and looked out the window. Then she said, Auntie Xiaomi, that cloud looks like a rabbit. Qin Mi choked, coughed, and glanced at Jiao. Jiao didn't notice anything unusual. She kept pointing outside. And there's a big one over there. That's the mommy rabbit. Qin Mi turned to me, her expression flickering between surprise and something she hadn't fully processed yet. I gave her a small nod. She turned back to Jiao, her voice a little hoarse. Which one is the mommy rabbit? The biggest one. Next to it is the daddy. And there's the little one. Jiao gestured on the glass. Our whole family is on the clouds. Qin Mi stroked her hair. She didn't say anything, but when she leaned back in her seat, she looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. I reached across the tray table. She put her hand in mine. The plane was passing through clouds. Sunlight broke through the white wisps, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow in the cabin. Jiao looked out the window. Qin Mi looked at me. I looked at both of them. Our hands held. When the plane steadied, Jiao fell asleep on the tray table. Qin Mi wrapped her in a blanket and leaned over, her voice low. She called me. I know. It's the first time. You taught her to know. She came up with it herself. I looked at her. Do you think it's too fast? She watched Jiao's small face on the tray table, her lashes casting fine shadows. After a moment, she shook her head. No, she said. I've been waiting for nearly a year. From the day I tried to change seats on the plane until now. I held her hand tighter. You don't have to wait anymore. She didn't answer, but she leaned her shoulder a little closer to mine. The 3 of us crowded into the first-class seats. Outside, clouds stretched beneath the wings like an endless white blanket. The sun shone from ahead, washing the whole sky in clear, limitless blue. Jiao shifted in her sleep, her small hand emerging from the blanket to rest on Qin Mi's arm. Qin Mi looked down at that little hand and didn't move. The plane landed in Sanya in the afternoon. I carried Jiao down the steps. Qin Mi walked beside me with the rabbit backpack and the light blue folding umbrella. The Sanya wind was warm, carrying the salt of the ocean. Jiao rubbed her eyes on my shoulder and said, Daddy, it's the ocean. Yes, I said, it's the ocean. Qin Mi laughed beside me and reached out to take Jiao, holding her close. Let's go, she said. Let's build the biggest sandcastle ever. Bigger than last time. Jiao put her arms around her neck. Bigger than last time. Big enough to live in. Big enough. Can mommy live in it too? Qin Mi's steps halted. She stood at the bottom of the steps, holding Jiao. The sun shone from above. She looked into Jiao's eyes and said gently, Mommy lives in your heart. But the castle, she'll see it too. Jiao thought for a moment, then nodded. Hugging her neck tighter, Qingmi walked forward. Holding her, I followed with the luggage. Outside the airport, the sun was bright enough to make us squint. Qingmi walked ahead, Xiao pointing at the clouds and chattering. Qingmi tilted her head to listen and smiled. The light blue umbrella swung from her backpack strap that I quickened my pace to catch up. She glanced at me as I fell in step beside her. The sun was fine. The sea breeze was warm. I reached out and adjusted her slipping backpack strap. The tips of her ears went a little pink, but she said nothing that we walked side by side toward the parking lot. Xiao hummed her off-key song on Qingmi's shoulder. Qingmi raised a hand to block the wind from her hair, and I saw it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Lawyer He. Annual filing complete. Ms. Qin has confirmed the shareholding change. Also. Enjoy your trip. I glanced at it. Locked the screen. The trip was indeed enjoyable. That day's sandcastle was enormous, big enough for Xiao to crawl in and out of. Big enough that Qingmi crouched beside it packing sand without bothering to brush her sandy knees. Big enough that when the sun set, all three of our shadows stretched across its walls and overlapped. As Xiao crawled through the castle, Qingmi glanced at the sun sinking over the horizon, then looked at me. Lu Yuanzhou. On the plane. When you said my daughter's well-behaved, what were you thinking? I thought. I was thinking, if she knew who she was sitting next to, would she still sit so steady? And now? She knows. Is she still steady? She placed a handful of wet sand in my palm. The sand glittered in the setting sun, cool and damp, slowly drying. I looked at the sand in my hand, then at her. She sat by the castle, hair windswept, a grain of sand on her cheek, that right dimple deep in the sunset light. Steady, I said. She smiled. Then she reached out and gently covered the back of my hand with more sand. It trickled through our fingers and fell in a small, warm mound between us.